Most people assume retirement investing is linear. Put in 10 to 20% of income every year for 30 or 40 years, and eventually the math is supposed to work. But even after someone builds a six-figure portfolio, the pressure rarely disappears. The balance is higher, yet the question stays the same. How long do I actually have to keep doing this? That tension exists because there is a precise mathematical shift most plans never mention: the moment when portfolio growth quietly becomes larger than what you personally add each year. If that shift goes unnoticed, people keep treating saving as the engine forever, even after the portfolio has already started doing more work than their paycheck. I'm Alex. Today, we're breaking this down in 10 layers, starting with the belief that you're supposed to invest until a fixed age, and ending with the point where contributions stop being the dominant force. That belief, the idea that everyone must invest until 65, no matter what the numbers say, is where most retirement planning quietly goes wrong. The lie about working until 65. The idea sounds harmless. You invest every year until 65 because that's what responsible people do. Retirement age becomes the finish line by default, not because of math, but because it's written into benefits, tax rules, and workplace plans. But that rule hides an assumption most people never question. It assumes your yearly contribution is always the main driver of progress. It assumes saving $20,000 at 50 has the same impact as saving $20,000 at 25. The numbers quietly disagree. At a 7% return, a portfolio of $100,000 produces about $7,000 in growth. Your contribution still dominates. You're doing most of the work, but at $300,000, growth jumps to roughly $21,000. Now the market is matching you. At $500,000, that same return generates $35,000 a year without extra effort. Most plans never surface. Once growth rivals or exceeds what you can save, continuing to treat contributions as mandatory is no longer driven by math. It's driven by habit. Yet the system never adjusts. Employer plans still assume constant saving. Retirement checklists still point to age, not portfolio behavior. So people keep pushing long after the balance of power has shifted. That's how investing until 65 became a rule, even when the numbers stopped requiring it. Coast fire, walking away on purpose. This is where the crossover point turns into a strategy. Coast fire is not about quitting work. It's about reaching a number where retirement is mathematically handled, even if you never invest another dollar. Here's how it works. You front-load effort early while time is on your side. Once the portfolio is large enough, you stop contributing and let compounding finish the job. Take a concrete example. Suppose the goal is $2 million by age 65, and you're 30 years old. With a 7% return, you only need about $187,000 invested today for the math to work. No future contributions required. That number is far smaller than most people expect. From there, the portfolio compounds for 35 years and reaches the target on its own. Income becomes optional for retirement purposes. Work shifts from necessity to choice. Miss that number at 30, the framework still holds. Hit it at 35, and the same amount grows to roughly $1.4 million by 65. Push to 40 and reach $300,000, and you overshoot the goal. The power here isn't precision, it's clarity. Instead of saving blindly for decades, Coast Fire gives you a defined finish line for effort. Once you cross it, pressure drops. The system keeps moving even if you stop pushing. The milestones that prove the system is real. Momentum doesn't arrive all at once. It shows up in stages, and each one changes how the system feels. The first is $10,000 invested. It's not life-changing money, but it's proof. For the first time, saving feels real instead of theoretical. The habit works. Then comes $100,000. This is where compounding becomes visible. In a strong market year, a portfolio that size can grow by $20,000 to $25,000. That's more than many people manage to save in an entire year. That growth didn't require extra effort. It showed up automatically. Next is the crossover itself. The year portfolio growth beats contributions. This is the first time money officially works harder than you do. The shift is subtle, but it's permanent. After that comes a stranger milestone, when portfolio growth exceeds your salary. At $1 million invested, a 10% year produces $100,000 in growth. If your income is $80,000, The portfolio just out-earned you. Then there's the 1x income benchmark. Having a full year of pay invested puts you ahead of most people and accelerates every milestone that follows. These markers aren't about bragging rights. They're checkpoints that confirm the system is doing what it's supposed to do, quietly and consistently. Why your crossover point is different. There is no universal number where this flips. The crossover point depends on how your system is built. Start with savings rate. If you're investing $40,000 a year instead of 20, your contributions dominate longer. Even a 7% return on $500,000 produces $35,000, which still trails your effort. In that case, compounding doesn't fully take over until the portfolio is closer to $600,000 or $800,000. Saving more can delay the crossover, even though it speeds up the end goal. Now look at the other side. If you're investing $10,000 a year, the bar is lower. At 7%, portfolio between $150,000 and $250,000 can already outgrow your contributions. Compounding becomes the primary driver sooner, not because returns are higher, but because effort is smaller. Returns matter too. At 8%, growth accelerates, and the crossover arrives earlier. At 5%, it takes longer. Same behavior, different outcome. This is why copying someone else's number never works. Their income, savings rate, timeline, and market path are not yours. The real takeaway is simple. Stop asking only how much you have. Start asking who is doing the work right now. When the portfolio takes over, the strategy shifts, and recognizing that moment is how you stop running a system on the wrong setting. Why early stopping is brutal. This is where most people misjudge compounding. Stopping contributions early feels harmless because the balance looks large relative to where you started. But the timeline tells a different story. Using the same framework, $20,000 invested each year at a 7% return. Reaching $100,000 takes about 5 years. That feels like progress. But if you stop there and rely on compounding alone, the math becomes unforgiving. It takes roughly 35 more years for that $100,000 to grow into $1 million. Quitting at $100,000 doesn't slow you down. It resets you back into waiting mode. Compare that to staying consistent. Contribute every year without stopping. And the same plan reaches $1 million in about 23 years total. That early stop just cost you more than a decade. The reason is simple. At low balances, growth is too small to carry momentum. 7% of 100,000 is only 7,000. That doesn't compound fast enough to replace your effort. This is why early years feel heavy. Every skipped contribution matters. Every pause is amplified. Compounding is present, but it's weak. Early stopping isn't freedom. It's delay disguised as relief. Until the portfolio reaches a certain mass, your contributions are not optional. They are structural. And mistaking progress for independence too early is how timelines quietly double. The psychological shift nobody warns you about. This is the part no spreadsheet prepares you for. Early on, investing feels like pushing a heavy object uphill. Every paycheck matters. Miss one, and progress slows immediately. You feel the weight because you are the system. Then something subtle changes. Somewhere around the 300 to 500,000 range, the effort no longer feels proportional to the outcome. You check your statement after a strong market year and realize the portfolio added more than you did. Not through hustle, through time. That realization is often uncomfortable, not motivating. People expect relief. Instead, they feel confusion. If the portfolio is now doing most of the work, why does the pressure still feel the same? The answer is habit. For years, effort was rewarded directly. Save more, move faster. That pattern gets wired in. So even after the math shifts, behavior doesn't. People keep optimizing contributions, delaying decisions, and postponing flexibility, even though the system no longer requires the same intensity. This is why many high earners still feel stuck. The portfolio is rolling, but they are still pushing. Recognizing this shift doesn't mean stopping. It means recalibrating. Understanding when effort stopped being the primary lever changes how you relate to work, income, and time. The psychological win isn't the number on the screen. It's realizing the weight you've been carrying is no longer fully on you. The critical mass zone. There is a middle zone where the math finally bends in your favor. Push to around 300,000 invested. Contributing 20,000 a year at 7%, and the picture changes. It takes roughly 11 years to get there. From that point, if you stop contributing entirely, Compounding alone would need about 18 more years to reach 1 million. Total timeline, roughly 29 years. Stopping at 300,000 doesn't destroy the plan, it stretches it. Now move one step further, reach 500,000. That usually takes about 15 years of consistent contributions. At that level, 7% growth produces around 35,000 a year. If you stop contributing there, the portfolio can double to 1 million in about 11 years. That's 26 years total. Compare that to the baseline of contributing nonstop, about 23 years to reach 1 million. The difference is 3 years. 3 years is the cost of stopping entirely once you reach critical mass. This is the zone most people never understand. Past this point, contributions still help, but they no longer control the outcome. Compounding has enough scale to carry momentum forward on its own. That's what critical mass actually means. Not freedom yet, but leverage. The ability to choose between grinding harder for speed or easing off and letting time do more of the work. Watching the math take over. This shift becomes obvious when you stop thinking in balances and start thinking in yearly movement. Assume a steady 7% return and a consistent $20,000 annual contribution. At 100,000 invested, the portfolio adds about 7,000 in a year. Most of the progress still comes from you. The math is secondary, but the same return behaves very differently as the base grows. At 300,000, 7% produces roughly 21,000. Now growth and contributions are roughly equal. You're still involved, but you're no longer alone. Compounding has entered the conversation. At 500,000, the math stops asking for permission. 7% generates about 35,000 in a single year. Your $20,000 contribution is no longer the main event. It's a supplement. And at 1 million, that same 7% creates 70,000 without additional effort. At that point, what you add barely changes the trajectory. Nothing about your behavior changed. Same contribution, same discipline, same habits. What changed was scale. This is the part most people underestimate. Compounding doesn't feel linear because it isn't. It feels slow for years, then suddenly loud. Not because markets got better, but because the base finally got large enough to amplify them. Once you see the math take over, it becomes clear why effort dominates early and why patience dominates later. The system rewards scale, not intensity. The hidden line nobody tracks. There is a specific line in investing almost no one measures. Not because it's complex, but because it isn't printed on statements or dashboards. That line is simple. It's the moment when your portfolio's annual growth quietly catches up to, and then exceeds, what you add in a year. Most people track balances. Some track net worth. Very few track this relationship. And that's the mistake. Here's why it matters. When you're contributing 20,000 a year and your portfolio is growing by 5 or 7,000, your behavior is the system. Miss a year, and progress slows immediately. Effort dominates outcomes. But as the portfolio grows, that balance shifts. At $300,000 earning 7%, the market adds about 21,000 in a year. That's the hidden line. Growth and effort are now equal. Cross it and the rules change. Past that point, skipping a contribution no longer breaks the plan. The portfolio still moves forward on its own. Slowly at first, then faster than most people expect. Yet almost no one is told to watch for this. Retirement calculators ask for age and savings rate, not contribution to growth ratios. Employer plans assume constant effort forever. So people keep thinking they are behind, even when the math says the system has started carrying weight for them. Once you see this line, you stop asking only how much you have. You start asking who is actually doing the work now. Key takeaways. The real shift in investing isn't a balance milestone. It's a control shift. Early on, progress is driven almost entirely by behavior. Contributions are the engine, and missing one matters. Over time, scale changes that relationship. Growth begins to rival effort, then quietly surpass it. That crossover point is not permission to stop. It's information. It tells you when effort stopped being the dominant lever and time became the primary force. Miss that signal, and people keep optimizing the wrong variable for years. This is why some portfolios feel heavy forever, while others start to feel inevitable. The difference isn't discipline. It's recognizing when the system has changed roles. If this way of thinking feels clearer than the usual age-based rules, that's intentional. This channel is about understanding the mechanics underneath money, not chasing motivation. If you want to keep learning how these systems actually behave over time, stay here. The next breakdown builds directly on this logic.